So, in today's video, we're going over the biggest Avengers Doomsday plot leak ever. Now, why do I call it that? Because this is actually explaining how Jonathan Majors, He Who Remains, screwed over our Iron Man in a way, but more precisely, explains how Doom was actually manipulated and controlled in a way by He Who Remains, Jonathan Majors. So, this is a really interesting plot leak. It's coming from a pretty unreliable source who's blocked me on Twitter. Majestic, but I will give my flowers. I remember. GeekyCast, Chad Ryan, follow him on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, so on and so forth. Said something very similar to this a few months ago, and I'm probably the only one that will give him credit for it. So the alleged leak reads like this. He Who Remains created Earth 616, a sacred timeline, and controlled the timeline to hide the true history of the multiverse. Victor Von Doom was considered too dangerous, so He Who Remains rewrote him into the 616 timeline. The rewriting turned Doom into Tony Stark with the same mind altered. A new identity and a life as a hero. Tony Stark felt like he did not fit in with his family because his real life had been stolen. Those feelings of not belonging are echoes of Doom's original identity, trying to awaken. The time travel Tony Stark used in Endgame was deliberately allowed by He Who Remains. He Who Remains permitted those time travels because he needed a variant of Loki to survive outside of his control. The survival of the Loki variant was part of He Who Remains' plan to prepare for future events. The main purpose of He Who Remains was not permitted peace, but to prepare for the multiversal war against the Kang variants who betrayed him. When Tony Stark dies, a key piece of He Who Remains could disappear. With the death of He Who Remains, the barrier containing realities break, and all versions of Doom come back into existence. Amongst those versions of Doom who fought and lost in the multiverse regain his memory. Now, there's only one major flaw that I can actually see in this whole plot is, we're not finished yet, is Jonathan Majors. I don't think he's going to return because Kevin Feige hasn't really addressed him. I know James Gunn got fired and then came back, but I don't think Disney would allow Jonathan Majors to come back. Although they could do it via Expedition with Dr. Doom explaining this all and showing maybe some V-roll. Maybe they've got a bunch of stuff we've not seen. So it continues to say, upon recovering his memory, that Doom feels humiliated for having been turned into a puppet of He Who Remains. This humiliation becomes his driving force. Doom doesn't just want revenge. He wants to rebuild the multiverse his own way. So do you remember Alex Perez? Although he's hit and miss, put up an article and he said, Dr. Doom will have a vendetta against the actual multiverse because he never actually went on to say what he meant. So this does make a lot of sense. But how they could pull this storyline off without having Jonathan Majors, who publicly has said multiple times he would return if he was allowed, I don't know how they could actually pull this off without Jonathan Majors returning properly. So it goes on to say, in the Fantastic Four post-credit scene, Dr. Doom finds Franklin Richards. Doom doesn't steal his powers. There's no indication he does. Takes his mask off, then Franklin touches his face, and that's how everyone seems to think all of a sudden he's going to look like, Iron Man, Tony Stark. But how would that be the case when baby Franklin Richards at this point would have never actually have met him? So how would he make his face look like him? He shows him the hidden truth about the origin of the multiverse, and maybe that's what happens when he touches his face. Doom's plan is to convince Franklin that together they can restore and or rewrite the true history. Doom needs the help of other powerful beings beside Franklin to rebuild the multiverse, and some people seem to think that's a variation of Wanda. Don't really know why that's going to be the case, and a bunch of other variants. So part of Doom's plan is to corrupt or use versions of heroes as tools to rewrite realities. That's where the likes of Steve Rogers may return, the likes of Scarlett Johansson may return, Wanda, all the evil variations that we've heard will allegedly appear in this movie. So it goes on to say Doomsday will begin with Doom attempting to recruit and manipulate Franklin and other entities to create a new origin of the multiverse, one where he is the architect. So most of this does sound pretty believable, but the biggest problem with it is how would you pull the whole He Who Remains storyline off without having Jonathan Majors come back to film new scenes and sequences? Because it says Doomsday storyline, He Who Remains is reimagined as one who created Earth 616 and rewrote history to hide the truth of the multiverse, including transforming Victor Von Doom into Tony Stark and shaping major events that prepare for a future multiversal battle. So this isn't new. Like I said early on in the video, the boy Geekycast, Chad Ryan, follow him, said this a long time ago, but that was from a theory point of view. But the way this majestic person, lad, I don't know who it is talking, it's like this is 100%. Because he put a tweet up saying, so many grown children crying because this isn't true. I have news for you. It's very real. It's an origin story that supports actions within the movie. Granted, this is translated into English. Avengers Doomsday, the greatest villain in the history of the comics movie, will debut, and it will be the... And then it goes on to say everything said. So I don't know if it's true, but a lot of it does actually make sense. A lot of it does make sense. Then the same person on Twitter went on to say, news and leaks. The Doomsday team wrapped filming and was given Dr. Doom R filming wrap. There was a creative chaos and constant rewrite. It includes Dr. Doom and the Fantastic Four universe. Everything indicates that the Avengers Doomsday script. Okay, that doesn't really have context. I like to post more than just one thing. So this article that I read was on Max Blizz, and they've been posting a lot of Avengers Doomsday stuff recently. Now, this does make a lot of sense. It really does make a lot of sense. But without Jonathan Majors returning, he's publicly said multiple times that he would actually return. I don't know how you could have a cohesive, coherent storyline, because you've got to remember, although most people probably have watched Loki season 1, Loki season 2, and maybe like Ant-Man 3, if you've not watched the whole He Who Remains Loki, kind of God Loki, of how Loki becomes God Atlantis Loki, and how he's holding like the timeline together, unless you've watched all that, there's going to have to be a lot of expedition, because although I get a lot of stick when I say this, Marvel movies are predominantly for a younger audience. So if they've not watched Loki season 1 and Loki season 2, how could you explain He Who Remains did all this to both the Tonys, really? And how would you explain that he who's humiliated Doom and turned him into a puppet, and Doom just wants revenge, wants to rebuild the whole multiverse and become God Emperor Doom? So yes, it does make chronological sense, but how would they turn this into a very cohesive, coherent storyline? I don't know if they could, to be honest, without Jonathan Majors returning. But like I said in the prologue, James Gunn was fired for past events, so to speak. But was he really fired? We don't know. But then he ended up coming back. So it's not that it's impossible for him to come back. It's just, I don't know if it's likely, but you're probably going to see this absolutely everywhere. But like I said, a lot of people have said this in the past. So realistically, it does tell us there realistically isn't much of a reason why they both have the same face. Although there kind of is, there really kind of isn't. It is interesting, and it would make sense, and it all loops back to Loki season 1 and Loki season 2, when He Who Remains created all this stuff. So it does make a lot of sense, but it's got to be cohesive for anybody to understand. If you haven't watched Loki season 1 and Loki season 2, you still have to understand the main narrative of what they're trying to go for. And the whole reason why the Russo said, oh, only RDJ could play Doom, means there's a massive connection. And we know the connection now. The biggest connection predominantly is what we've just gone over, is transforming Victor Von Doom into Tony Stark in a roundabout way, as we've just explained. When Tony dies, key pieces of He Who Remains, control disappears with the death of He Who Remains. The barriers controlling realities break, and all versions of Doom come back into existence, and monster versions of Doom who fought and lost in the multiversal war to regain his memories. Then Doom feels like a puppet and just wants to destroy the multiverse. So this could very well be very likely. I just don't know how they could pull it off without bringing Mr. Jonathan Majors back. So like always, guys, let us know, what do you think? Check us out on TikTok, Warstu. Check us out on Instagram, Warstu. And check us out on Twitter, Warstu. And I will catch you in another video, guys, very soon. Catch ya later.